The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page. My name's Betty Weibel, and I'm the author of a new book, The Ohio Literary Trail, a Guide. And I don't know who said that quote, but it's very appropriate when we talk about this new book because it's written for you, everyone in Ohio and out. And the book is a guide to more than 70 locations around the state, and it showcases our rich literary heritage. And they honor authors, poets, illustrators. We also have playwrights and cartoonists, other influencers of the written word. It's a very diverse travel guide, and the sites are unique in that they are all based here in Ohio and focused on our heritage. We include museums, historic homes, but also libraries, which people don't think of for tourism, and historic markers, which are incredibly important in the communities where they're located and the heritage that they remember. I put a lot of research into determining the sites on this trail, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story, but I'll come back to some of the details of those sites. But when I tell you about the trail, I have to tell you about the background first. So I am a writer and grew up as a writer all my life. I started my career as a journalist in daily and weekly newspapers before I moved into the public relations field. And there I worked on corporate levels, starting my own public relations agency. Among the work I did was for the state of Ohio. And as a lifelong Ohioan, I was really proud to work for Ohio's travel and tourism promotion and spent many years working on the Ohio Bicentennial celebration. And talk about creating a sense of pride in your home state. The Bicentennial did just that. All of this experience led up to my putting together this literary trail project, and I called upon all of that. At the beginning of 2000, I was a new board member on the Ohioana Library Association. And the word Ohioana, I learned, isn't a combination of something between Ohio and Indiana at all. It is a word that references all things Ohio. And that's what the Ohioana Library specializes in. They have a collection of books and works, everything from music to comics and cartoons that they keep based on Ohio writers and about Ohio. And so the board I joined, I learned that their mission, one of the things they wanted to do was increase awareness of the diverse Ohio contributions to literature worldwide. And I thought that was a little bit ambitious. What do you mean, Ohio's worldwide contributions? But as I dug deeper, I learned that was exactly what they meant. And I knew there was a need to increase awareness. So I started digging in and researching all that is a part of Ohio's illustrious past and the culture and how it's impacted. I am not the person who created the idea for the literary map, but at the beginning of 2000, this map that you see to my side existed. It's a lovely, beautiful poster, and I had a copy of it. It's like the old-fashioned fold-up road maps, and it's very nice. It lists authors that were born in Ohio, and the marks all around the state show where they were born. There's only 11 sites, though, on this map that someone could actually visit, and it was wonderful that it showed off Ohio authors. But again, 11 sites doesn't really show how illustrious our state is in contributing to world contributions in literature. So as I dug in deeper, I had the idea, working with the Ohioana Library Association team and the executive director, David Weaver, that we should showcase more of what Ohio has contributed. So we started talking at the beginning of 2000 and created a digital map that would live on the website. Now, my background, as I said, with the Ohio Bicentennial and the Ohio History Connection as a board member went into understanding all of these diverse sites. We collected more than 70 sites and put them on a map that we made digital, and it lives on the Ohioana website at ohioana.org. And if you go to the resource page, you can see it. It's interactive in that you can hover over a site and it'll take you to the website for that location. So it's very handy. But as we know, traveling, sometimes you don't want to constantly be on your phone or on a website. So we decided that a print map was helpful as well. So you can print a PDF. I had completed all of this research, and we had the discussion. The pandemic had started, and it was May. We said, who's going to want to travel in the middle of a pandemic? But we decided to go forward anyway because the feeling was maybe this is the ideal time. People are trapped at home, trapped in their own communities, trapped in Ohio, and they couldn't travel far beyond. Maybe it's a good time for people to take a closer look at the treasures in their own backyard, and that is exactly what we had. So the resulting map that started with this simple fold-up map became digital, became online, and we launched it in June. We were overwhelmed with the response from media, libraries, and the public wanting to learn more about the Ohio Literary Trail. And there was a lot of exposure and attention to that. So with that popularity, we decided I had all this research already done. Now I've written other books and they were very planned out and took years. They're all nonfiction, all a lot of interviews and research, and that went into this book as well, but I couldn't go and visit sites because things were closed. So a lot of the research was done already to determine who belonged on the trail. We decided to take that research and put it into a travel guide. And that is the result of this book that's been published early in 2021. So the reason for a book, you know, I grew up in a family that did a lot of themed travel, educational, cultural travel, and parents liked to do that. And as we were raising our own daughter, we'd travel to places like Key West and visit Hemingway House. And we'd visit, in Salem, in addition to all the wonderful sites, Hawthorne's home. Boston was an incredible tour of literary sites and old bookstores. And themed travel is very popular, but people like to have something in hand when they travel and do their research. Hence, a lot of the background I picked up went into this book, as you can see when you open it. The book includes a lot of the locations, more than 90 photos of the sites, but it also includes, as I mentioned, the historical markers. I included all of the text of those markers. So Ohio has more than 1,700 historical markers around the state. We drive by them every day and probably never take time to stop and read them. But these markers, in some cases, are the pride of their communities, and they're all that remains of history. And I wanted to encourage people, by including the marker text, as you go on a literary treasure hunt around Ohio, to stop and read those markers, because the history is important. It's appealing to go to a museum and a historic home. Harriet Beecher Stowe House, for example, in Cincinnati, is a historic home, museum, and the historical marker lives there. But there are places that all that remains of history is the historical marker. And those are included in this. The Ohio History Connection I mentioned earlier is responsible for so many of these markers. And during the bicentennial, there was an effort to create themed markers, and many of the literary trail markers were created during Ohio's birthday celebration. When I mentioned Hemingway House, when we were traveling in Florida and touring the Hemingway House, I looked up at a display on Hemingway's bedroom wall, and there was a picture of a man named Sherwood Anderson, and he's from Ohio. And it talked about how Sherwood Anderson had influenced Hemingway in his early days. And he was a man from Clyde, Ohio, up in Northwest Ohio. So it illustrates the incredible depth of Ohio. He was just one of many examples of the sites that I'd found and markers that are around the state. Here in Ohio, we were trapped in a pandemic and people were looking for something to do. The trail works in that you might just decide to take a drive and visit something that you've never looked at. My daughter and I went for a drive one day. I'm from Chagrin Falls in Geauga County. We drove to a close marker in Garrettsville, Ohio, and it was a marker for a man named Hart Crane. There was nothing to see in terms of literary destinations other than this marker. So we stopped and read the marker, and we learned that Hart Crane is a world-famous poet from here in Ohio. His father, we found, was the man who started Lifesavers Candy, and we read this on the marker. While we were learning about Hart Crane, we drove around the town of Garrettsville, and we saw the historic mill. We saw a bookstore that was closed, of course, but we hoped to return to visit again. Restaurants. It was a charming town. That's one short trip on the trail that you might decide to make. Or you may decide you're going to spend a day or a week doing a literary trail tour around the state. There are 5 regions of Ohio, and the book is divided by regions of the state. And you can take a trip and see things in your own county or right here in Northeast Ohio. You might visit sites, or you go a little farther. Ohio is amazing in that it's located in proximity to 50% of the nation's population is within a day's drive. We can drive from one end of Ohio to the next corner in less than 5 hours. So it makes for a wonderful trip, and people don't think of traveling in their own state. We have bucket lists of what we want to see one day, or when the pandemic ended, we all had places we wanted to go. But a lot of those stops we can accomplish right here and get some wonderful education and pride in what we have to offer. So I wanted to point out, we took another day trip to nearby Stark County. We saw Haynes House, which is a beautiful spot in Alliance. And it's not just a picture in a book, but when you go and you visit a site, you see this house could have been a house in any neighborhood. And we looked at it. It's a stop on the Underground Railroad, and the history is very rich. The book gives you a little synopsis of that history. It's not meant to be a history of that location. It's meant to whet your appetite to want to go to your library or go to a bookstore and learn more about Hart Crane or Haynes House. But when you stand and you look at these sites like Haynes House, you can see it's in a neighborhood. Could be any stop. The location was closed at the time I visited, but we could look up to the attic and see where we knew slaves had one day been hiding, and the Haynes family had kept them safe on their journey. And it's a site that's been used in fiction and nonfiction. It's inspired a lot of writing at the Haynes House. Again, while we were in Alliance, we toured around the city, and it was a very proud community. We found this amazing, fun location, the Troll House Museum, and it had everything troll related. So again, Ohio has some incredible stops along the way that you'll discover as you look at the little communities around and the bigger destinations. So I'd like to take you on a little tour. I'm not going to show you all 70 sites on the 70 plus sites that are featured in the book, but I'll give you a few highlights. I haven't visited them all, and I feel as a researcher and a writer, having pulled all this information together to share with you, I still do a lot of travel writing, and I enjoy sharing places that will inspire people to visit. So that's what this book does. And I'll give you a few highlights that I'm looking forward to visiting. I haven't had the pleasure of seeing them all at all. I've spoken to all of the individuals from the locations so they can be a part of it. They've shared photographs. We've done a lot of talks at libraries around the state this year and continue to do talks for literary organizations and businesses to help them know the treasures in Ohio. So a few spots right here. Let's start with Northeast Ohio, where we're located. We have so much to visit right in Richland County. I will point out in Richland County, the home of Louis Bromfield, an amazing conservationist. He was a man who Hemingway actually was jealous of. Bromfield lived, and I won't give you dates and years because that's not this kind of talk. You can look them up anywhere. But Bromfield was living in Paris, and people like Hemingway were jealous of him and Fitzgerald because in his time he'd earned the Pulitzer Prize and he'd been writing and being recognized for his work before some of the other greats were. And he returned to Ohio and put his wonderful conservation theories to work at Malabar Farm, a location that is a state park here in Ohio. Malabar, he had a number of celebrities visit, and it's famous for the wedding of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall were married right at Malabar Farm. Nearby Oak Hill Cottage is another location that Bromfield wrote about, and it's featured in the book. So that's one of the locations I can't wait to visit and spend some time. Again, you could spend a day there visiting. You can see the cows roaming the acreage. You can walk along the outdoors. You can see the big house where Bogey and Bacall were married and take some tours of the farm and see his wonderful practices. So that's a huge undertaking when you get to go visit that Malabar Farm destination. Another destination right here in Lorain County is at the Lorain Library is a reading room dedicated to Toni Morrison, Ohio's true star. And Toni won Pulitzer Prize. She was the first Black woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. She's won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and she's certainly started her early days in Ohio being honored by the Ohioana Library Awards, which are the second most prestigious awards in the country for literary accomplishments. So Toni is our star, and in Lorain there is a reading room that she helped dedicate. She worked and volunteered at the Lorain Library in her youth. She says she spent more time reading than shelving books, but it's a wonderful place to visit, and there is was not at the time the book was written, but there is now a historical marker dedicated to Toni Morrison. All of the sites in the book are honoring people who are no longer living. So as I hear from all of our audience, they'll say, you should include Rita Dove in the book. And I say, you're absolutely right. Rita's an amazing contribution to Ohio, but we're focusing on those who are no longer with us. And the back of the book does include writers who are living, noteworthy Ohio writers by genre and location, but it also includes all of the writers who have won awards for various genres at the Ohioana Awards. And that's a huge listing since the 40s that is in the back of the book. Moving from Northeast Ohio, as we head over to the Northwest, I would say one of the stops that I can't wait to see soon and I mentioned libraries for tourism, the Toledo Lucas Library has a wonderful collection, the world's largest collection, I think, of Nancy Drew memorabilia. A woman, Jennifer Fisher, collected so much, and they have rotating displays at the Toledo Library, 2 rooms. You feel like you're walking into a Nancy Drew novel when you go there. And the writer of the first Nancy Drew novels, the first, I think, 30 of those novels, was a woman who worked at the Toledo Blade. Her name was Mildred Wirt Benson. Now, we know the name on the novels as Carolyn Keene, and the publisher created Nancy Drew and then found a writer to pen the stories. So Mildred was responsible with the very first Nancy Drew and the first 30-some books of the series, and there were other writers that continued after Millie. But there's pictures in the book of Millie at the with a sculpture of Nancy Drew that are quite lovely. And I think that's a wonderful. Millie visited the library and on the 90th anniversary of Nancy Drew, and she passed away at the age of 96, but she was very important in that display. And those artifacts and memorabilia in Toledo will be memorializing Nancy Drew for many years. She's someone, the Teen Sleuth inspired so many people, first ladies, Supreme Court justices, and so many others in their days, and she continues to inspire. Other stops in Ohio not to be missed, I would say you want to look in Southwest Ohio. We'll move down there into the area around Dayton and Cincinnati. So many wonderful sites for Paul Laurence Dunbar, an amazing poet, African-American poet in the Dayton area, and that is an incredible site to visit. As I mentioned, Harriet Beecher Stowehouse, who she influenced the views of slavery here in the United States. But there's a lot of unknown sites that I located, and there's one I didn't realize in my research in Hamilton, Ohio. The entire town of Hamilton is so proud of the work of a writer, Robert McCluskey, and he's a children's writer and illustrator, and won so many awards. Before the Ohioana Awards even began, he was creating marvelous work. So at Heritage Hall in Hamilton, Ohio, there is a wonderful museum dedicated to Robert McCluskey. He wrote Make Way for Ducklings, a lovely book, and the illustrations are beautiful. He did carvings as well, and just this style is beautiful of his work. He grew up in Hamilton, spent a lot of time at the Hamilton Library, and so there's a walking tour all around the town. But outside Heritage Museum and Heritage House is a beautiful park with a display of a sculpture from one of his books, Lentil. And the dog in Lentil and little boy Lentil are displayed in that park. So even if you're driving by and you don't have time to go inside, or if it happens to be closed, you can walk around the park. Many of the sites that are featured in the book have beautiful parks and outdoor gardens, and that's one of them that I would highly encourage you to visit. Inside, there's a book that I remember growing up, Homer Price. And it was so popular, there was a story about a donut machine. And there's a replica of the donut machine on the second floor of McCluskey's museum. And you can see this, children are fascinated by the donut machine, and it's worth visiting as well. So that's one of the hidden treasures in Southwest. There are so many, as I said, you could spend a week in Southwest Ohio alone. Central Ohio has some other treasures. The Thurber House is amazing literary center. There are so many programs, again, gardens there that pay tribute to James Thurber, and he is an amazing cartoonist, probably one of the most noteworthy of all time. And Thurber House is where he grew up, and you can visit the room where you can see his typewriter on display. The typewriter's featured on the back of the book as well. He grew up there, and he tells one of his ghost stories that he heard sounds, and you can stand in the same room and imagine him hearing the sound of ghosts in the house. Thurber also in the garden pays tribute. You'll see statues of dogs. There's a lot of dogs in his work that he's quite fond of. So I would encourage you to visit not only the house and the gardens, but the amazing literary center. And if it's closed, go online to all of these sites and get a great visit and do a little research before you visit. Also in Central Ohio, an unusual library, Wagnall's Memorial. It's the former home. In 1925, Wagnalls was named by Success magazine one of the most beautiful examples of Gothic Tudor architecture, and now it's a library and has a lot of artifacts and artwork from the Wagnalls family. If you remember the Funk and Wagnalls encyclopedias, that's the family home from, and Mabel Wagnall and her family grew up in nearby Lithopolis, Ohio. And that town, when you visit the sites, you want to look at the towns and where the authors and where the people who were inspired grew up, because it tells the whole story when you see and you walk in their footsteps, as Hamilton and Lithopolis illustrate. Southeast Ohio, a little farther from us, and you think, what's down in Southeast Ohio? Well, Zane Grey, the father of the Western novel, wrote so many novels, and they were turned into Western movies and films that were so popular in his day. There is a museum, if you look on TripAdvisor, it will tell you it's a hidden treasure for Ohio. It's 3 museums in one. You have the Zane Grey Museum with a lot of his studio and his works and displays, but you also have a tribute to the National Road Museum at that same location, and there's also a pottery museum in that location, and that's not far from Zanesville, Ohio, where he was born. Again, while you're there, you can swing by and see the museum for John Glenn and his home in that same part of the state. When we put this trail together, we wanted to make sure we had something for everyone. And as a PR person, I know what it's like to want to create something appealing. And this isn't necessarily meant for all book lovers. We want to create new book lovers. So we added some sites that are a little unusual. And Southeast Ohio is one of my favorite examples. In Hocking Hills, there is a woman who inspired many books and writers. Her name is Grandma Gatewood, and there's a section of the Appalachian Trail at Hocking Hills named in her memory for Grandma Emma Gatewood, who's from Ohio. She is the oldest woman to hike solo on the Appalachian Trail, which goes from Georgia to Maine, and part of that goes through Ohio. And it's more than 2,000 miles. And Emma hiked on her own and with a little knapsack on her back and did that trail all on her own. And she had 11 children and countless grandchildren, I can't tell you. And she inspired children's books about her journey as well as adult books. And it was found later that Emma Gatewood was the victim of spousal abuse. And that's one of the reasons she spent so much time hiking. And it is an inspirational story, but I wanted to include this site because of the incredible natural beauty that Ohio has to offer at this park. But also there's some displays at the visitor center there that honor Emma Gatewood. And if a member of your family, if you say, I want to do a themed trip, but Dad's not so into books and literary sites, well, we have some wonderful outdoor sites as well. Another site that's included in the book are some children's storybook trails that the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and the governor's reading initiative has kicked off. It's called Storybook Trails. So there's one listed in the book in each region of the state that showcases wonderful sites for children. And there are a lot of children's sites noted throughout the book, but these storybook trails take a children's story and enlarge the panels so they're child size. And it's about a mile-long trail through various Ohio state parks that are, you can find them on the website, that children can walk the trail and they read the panels along the way and learn about, it's a story about nature, different nature books for children. So you see there's a lot of variety in our book, and definitely show you a lot of literary themed items. But it's not all about the past. It was very important in creating the literary trail and writing the guide to connect it to today. And there's a section of the book where we also include around the state literary festivals. And there's one important book or literary festival in each of the major regions of the state. If you've never been to a book festival or book fair, you know, we grew up with the scholastic book fairs. We'd save our money and go and buy books at school book fairs, and you'd have glitter pens and all kinds of other things you could buy. And these book fairs are like that on steroids. They're wonderful. And the biggest one here in Northeast Ohio is in Worcester in the fall. It's called the Buckeye Book Fair. There's another major one, the Ohioana Book Festival, that the last 2 years had to be virtual, and you can go to the Ohioana site. You'll see not only that it's a place where authors can meet their readers and get to see them face to face and sign books and sell books, but there are panels with great information from the authors where they tell their stories, and stories of memoirs and biographies, as well as the writing of fiction and cartoons and just wonderful children's writers and illustrators are there as well. So if you've never been to a book fair, put that on your calendar of must-dos, because it is a wonderful feature that connects, like I said, readers and writers, and it's a great time to spend a day at a book fair. The book does show you one in every region of the state, and a few of them have been canceled because of the pandemic. Like I said, the Ohioana Book Festival had more than 150 authors, illustrators, poets, conducting online virtual panels, and they're all still living online for you to go ahead and see, and it doesn't cost a penny. So definitely important to connect the dots to the past and the present. As I said, I wanted a book that would increase awareness of Ohio's contribution to the literary world, and the Literary Trail does just that. It also inspires discovery in our state and wanting to travel and see things that we have right here and take for granted in our own backyard. But I will also mention that I wanted this book to inspire others who are budding writers, poets, illustrators, cartoonists, whatever your creative desire. Ohio has a rich history, and you're in good company. And when you learn the stories of these people and how they got started, some of them against all odds, we have incredible diversity, people who were hundreds of years before their time, Black writers, people from the gay lesbian world who were outspoken at a time when that wasn't the norm. And so we have incredible leaders and influencers in our history, and you're in good company with all of that they've overcome and paved the way for us to do. I wanted to share just a little bit. Toni Morrison, as I mentioned, who won nearly every literary award imaginable, was very proud of her Ohio roots. And she said of her home state, "Ohio is paramount to so much of my work. My gratitude to you and fellow Ohioans is profound, not only for the award, but the gift of my imagination." And she said that when she won the Ohioana Award. Another Ohio writer to inspire you to your own creativity is Pulitzer Prize winner Anthony Doerr. And he wrote to me when I was putting together this book about his Ohio roots and how Ohio influenced him. And Tony wrote the Pulitzer Prize winning All the Light That We Cannot See. He said, "Ohio's been instrumental to everything about my life, of course, as all home places are. Growing up in Geauga County made me who I am. I learned to work hard, to pay attention to nature, to be loyal, to drive in the snow, to rake leaves, and the simple pleasure of reading a book under a tree." National Book Award winner Jacqueline Woodson was born in Columbus, but she moved out of state with her family when she was only a year old. Yet her tie to her birthplace remained strong. She said, "I still say that I'm Buckeye to the bone. Ohio was my first home. My dad, aunt, and cousins are all still here. I love that I can claim the Midwest, the South, and Brooklyn as home, and in each place, some part of me is infinitely grounded. So yeah, even if you can't hear the twang, Ohio is a part of me." And I'll leave you on that wonderful word, because Ohio is a part of all of us. And I hope that the book that we've put together, and it was like a puzzle, more than writing, but in researching and putting the pieces together for the Ohio Literary Trail, I hope that it inspires you to want to learn more about your home state of Ohio and how it's inspired so many others to do great creative things, and that it inspires your interest in Ohio as well, and your pride.